Listen to me. No matter what happens out there, you are my hope. I will find a way for us to survive this.
Look at this little one. He is absolutely perfect, isn't he? We are so happy he is finally here.
It's okay, sweetie. Daddy's here.
Just a small pinch now, almost done.
To look here on the growth chart, everything seems to be progressing normally.
And the feeding amounts listed here are accurate for his weight.
Yes, those are the recommended guidelines we follow.
Early in the mountain morning, a thin layer of mist still covered the hills. The air was fresh and quiet, so still that even the sound of wind through the trees could be heard clearly. Inside a small wooden house, Trieu Duong had already woken up. He gently held baby Truc Lam, just 3 months old, still sleeping peacefully in a warm cloth wrap. Today was an important day, even though nothing about it seemed loud or special at first glance. It was the first time he would take his child for vaccination. A simple task for many, but to him, it marked the beginning of protecting his child on a much longer journey ahead. He looked at his baby for a long moment, as if trying to memorize every tiny breath. Being a father doesn't always require big actions. Sometimes it is simply about being present, being careful, and loving deeply in the smallest moments. Trieu Duong carefully began preparing everything. A small bag was placed neatly on the wooden table, holding the vaccination record, a few soft towels, a spare set of clothes, and a prepared milk bottle. He checked each item one by one, making sure nothing was missing. It wasn't because he was overly anxious, but because this was the first time he would take his child on such a trip. Everything had to be ready. Baby Truc Lam stirred slightly, opening his eyes for a moment before closing them again, as if not ready to wake up. Trieu Duong smiled gently and adjusted the cloth wrap around him. In that moment, he realized that even something as simple as packing a small bag had taken on a deeper meaning. It was no longer just preparation, it was a clear expression of responsibility and care. The road from the house to the commune health station wasn't very far, but it was winding and sloped. On one side stood tall mountains, and on the other were terraced rice fields stretching along the hills. Trieu Duong carried his baby in his arms, walking slowly and steadily. He didn't rush. Every step was careful, as if even a small mistake might disturb the child. A gentle breeze passed by, carrying the scent of soil and fresh grass. Baby Truc Lam remained asleep, breathing softly and evenly. Looking down at his child, Trieu Duong realized that the road felt different today. Not because the scenery had changed, but because something inside him had. He was no longer walking just for himself. Each step now carried responsibility, carrying the quiet determination to protect a small, fragile life. The commune health station appeared simple, with white walls and a few rows of wooden benches. The space wasn't large, but it was clean and orderly. A few other mothers were also waiting, each holding a small baby like Truc Lam. No one spoke loudly. Only soft whispers and the faint sounds of infants filled the room. Trieu Duong found a seat and held his child close, firm yet gentle. His eyes moved around the room, feeling both unfamiliar and familiar at the same time. It wasn't a strange place, but today it carried a different meaning. He looked at the other mothers and saw the same patience and quiet concern reflected in them. In that small space, there was a subtle connection. Adults gathered together, each doing the same thing, trying to protect their children in the best way they knew. When it was their turn, Trieu Duong stood up and carried his child to the vaccination table. The nurse gently took baby Truc Lam, her movements practiced and precise. Trieu Duong stood close, his eyes fixed on his child. The small needle was prepared quickly. Everything happened in just a few seconds, but to him, time seemed to slow down. As the needle touched, Truc Lam cried. It wasn't a loud cry, but it echoed clearly in the quiet room. Trieu Duong felt his heart tighten. He reached out instinctively, wanting to hold his baby immediately. In that moment, he understood something deeply about being a father. not shielding his child from all pain, but being there when the child faced it. As soon as it was over, he quickly took his baby back, gently patting and whispering soft words meant only for the two of them. After the injection was done, Trieu Duong quickly took baby Truc Lam back into his arms. The crying continued softly, as if the baby had not yet understood what had just happened. He gently patted his child's back, while his other hand held the cloth wrap firmly to make the baby feel secure. "It's okay. Dad is here," he whispered softly. It wasn't so the baby could understand, but so he himself could calm down. After a while, the crying slowly faded into uneven breaths. The baby rested against his chest, as if searching for something familiar again. Trieu Duong looked down and saw the tears still on his child's face. He couldn't take away the pain, but he could be there through it. And sometimes, what matters most is not protecting a child from every hurt, but letting them know that no matter what happens, there will always be arms waiting to hold them. After the baby had calmed down, the doctor called Trieu Duong over for further guidance. The doctor's voice was gentle and clear, unhurried. "This stage is very important. The baby should be exclusively breastfed if possible," the doctor said. Trieu Duong nodded, listening carefully to every word. "Monitor weight, keep the baby warm, and watch for any fever after the injection." These sounded like simple instructions, yet they formed the foundation of the child's development. He didn't take notes, but his focused gaze showed he was remembering everything. Each piece of advice felt like another layer of responsibility placed upon him. Trieu Duong understood that caring for a child was not just instinct, it was something to learn day by day. And sometimes those simple words were exactly what helped him feel more steady on his journey as a father. After leaving the consultation area, Trieu Duong sat down again for a moment, holding his baby before heading home. He didn't speak, just watched as Truc Lam slowly fell asleep after crying. The doctor's words still echoed in his mind. Before, he thought being a father only required love. But today he realized that love alone wasn't enough. It also required understanding and learning. Each stage of a child's growth came with different things to pay attention to. He gently touched the baby's tiny hand, feeling its subtle movements. Such a small life, yet carrying such a great responsibility. Trieu Duong didn't feel overwhelmed. Instead, he felt the need to grow a little more each day. Perhaps that is how a father grows, not in a single moment, but through many small experiences. Leaving the health station, Trieu Duong began walking back along the same path. The sunlight had softened, gently covering the terraced fields. Baby Truc Lam slept peacefully in his arms, as if the earlier crying had never happened. Trieu Duong walked more slowly than before, not because he was tired, but because he wanted to be more certain with each step. The road was the same, but something inside him had changed. The earlier anxiety was replaced with calmness and clarity. He now knew what to do and what to pay attention to for his child. Each step was no longer just about returning home, but about carrying new understanding. In that moment, he realized that the journey of being a father was not a distant path, but a series of slow, steady steps taken every single day. In the late afternoon, the small wooden house became quiet again. Baby Truc Lam slept peacefully after a long day, breathing softly and steadily. Trieu Duong sat nearby, doing nothing, simply watching his child. The last light of the day came through the window, casting a warm glow on the baby's face. He thought back to the morning, the moment of crying during the injection, and the doctor's advice. None of it seemed extraordinary, yet together they made the day meaningful. He realized that being a father was not about doing great things, but about being present in the smallest moments of a child's life. The day passed simply, yet completely. And perhaps that was a beginning, not loud but steady, for the long journey ahead of both father and child.
Hello mọi người, hôm nay mình sẽ trình bày câu chuyện về Toàn, một người đàn ông sống với những ký ức đã mất Khi anh dần dần xây dựng cuộc sống của mình thông qua những công việc thường nhật giản dị và sự chăm sóc thầm lặng của những người xung quanh. Dưới ánh mắt theo dõi của một bà lão, Toàn đã bắt đầu thấy vững vàng trở lại. Dù câu hỏi về quá khứ vẫn tiếp tục làm anh trăn trở, trung tâm của sự bối rối ấy là Tử Diễm, một cô gái trẻ tốt bụng và tận tâm, người mà sự ấm áp gần gũi của cô khơi gợi những tia sáng le lói của những ký ức bị lãng quên. Mặc dù anh không thể nhớ mình đã yêu cô ấy như thế nào, nhưng sự hiện diện của cô mang lại cho sự an ủi, hy vọng và khát khao lớn lao, muốn tìm lại cho con người mình trước đây. Qua công việc chung, những cuộc trò chuyện nhẹ nhàng, những khoảnh khắc bình dị tràn đầy ấm áp, Toàn nhận ra rằng sự chữa lành không phải là lúc nào cũng đến từ việc nhớ lại mọi thứ cùng một lúc, mà đến từ việc sống và yêu thương, tin tưởng những người luôn ở bên cạnh anh khi anh thấy lạc lõng nhất.